right, welcome everyone. How's the conference been so far? Has it been enjoyable, educational, good value? Yes? Woo. Awesome. Would come again? Awesome. That's great to hear. It's been a lot of work, but it's fun to finally see it come to fruition, and great to see so many folks getting so much out of it. With me on the panel, we've got Chad Sanderson, all the way from Seattle. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're working on. You're big in the data contract space. You run the data quality camp. What else have you been up to in your free time?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the majority of it, actually. So thank you for that. Yeah, well, I left my last gig at a late stage freight technology startup called Convoy back in November. I'm doing my own thing now. So I do a little bit of consulting. I'm working on a couple of side projects. I've got a book in the works with O'Reilly called Data Contracts, which should be coming out early next year. So that's my preemptive notice to all of you on that. And then, like Peter said, I run a Slack community called Data Quality Camp that's free to join. So please go do that also.
Quite an active Slack community at that. Welcome. Nobody's heard of Joe, but so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Joe. I spend most of my time on Data Quality Camp. That's about it.
He's written a book, got another book coming out, a few other bits and bobs.
Yeah,
a podcast or two.
Podcasts, some cool courses coming out. Can't really talk about them yet, but know that they're coming. Book, what else? A bunch of stuff. Wait for 2024. A lot of cool stuff dropping.
Stay tuned.
Joe in 2024.
All right. And
sounds like a U.S. election thing.
Yeah, it's better than any of the other candidates. Come on.
And Emily Melhuish, all the way from Auckland, New Zealand.
Whoa.
Woo!
Represented.
Not as far as you guys. Hi, I'm Emily. I don't want to give away too many spoilers because I'm the last talk today, which you'll hear a bit more about my very interesting career. But yeah, I'm the lead engineer at Multitudes, which creates insights for happier and higher-performing teams. I run the hardware meetup back in Auckland, New Zealand. Came from the hardware community initially, so it's really nice to be part of other data engineers here.
Okie dokie. And what's with the shirt, Ryan?
It's a pretty ducky shirt, isn't it?
Yes, very, very much so. So you're from Boulder, Colorado. You've got quite the seasoned career in tech. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I've been largely working in the data community for the last, 8 years or something like that, maybe even longer. And was at Neo4j. I was at Google on the BigQuery team briefly. I did Databricks, and now I'm co-founder at MotherDuck, which is basically taking DuckDB and bringing DuckDB into the cloud, which might sound like an oxymoron for some of you folks who know a little bit about DuckDB, but we strongly believe in the idea of simplify data analytics, and that's what we're doing.
Very good, very good. I wanted to keep these panelists on their toes by, coming up with a bit of a fresh theme and springing it on them on the last minute. So we'll probably go with data engineering for startups. What are some of the things that we should be thinking about when implementing perhaps a new data platform, or some of the new trends in data engineering for startups and early stage scale-ups? But we'd love to make this as interactive as possible. So if you've got any questions in regards to sort of data engineering for startups, but beyond that as well, it'd be lovely to hear from you. We've got a couple of roving mics around. Lars up the back, I'm sure you can't miss him. And I think Aditya, who you've probably all met from the Melbourne Data Engineering Meetup. Awesome. So Chad, data contracts, do they apply to data engineering startups or startups that are implementing their first data stack?
I think, very quickly, just to sort of refresh folks, if you're not familiar with the term data contracts. A data contract is essentially a data API. It's an agreement between a data producer and a data consumer on what is the data expectations that a consumer has from a producer. So it would include something like the schema of the data, the business logic of the data, the SLAs, like these types of things, and you could extend that really as far as you want. The point, though, is that it needs to be codified and it needs to be reinforced programmatically. So if you just have these constraints, but they aren't reinforced anywhere, then that's just documentation. And if you only have the actual tests and monitors, but no constraint definition, then that's just like testing. So that's data contracts. And whether or not data contracts are useful for startups is the question Peter asked. I think the answer is that it depends, like most things in life, unfortunately. There is a cost to data contracts in that, number one, it does make the upstream teams move slower, right? Like it's governance. It is a form of doing iterative data governance. And anytime you apply governance, it means the teams slow down. And so if you're in the startup mindset of like, we don't know what product is actually going to work, we're still trying to find product market fit, and your data is always changing, then having guardrails in place that prevent you from changing quickly is probably not good. But if you have a company that is focused on data products, like that is the primary thing that you are selling, so you are an AI company, or you're a data science company, or maybe you're a company that vends data to other businesses, then I think data contracts or data APIs are essential.
Very good, very good. Then Joe, data modeling is all the rage. Well, that's the thing that you've been speaking about a lot recently. Tell us, should you be looking at data modeling when you're an early stage startup?
No, not at all. I'm just kidding. Well, you got to look at it two ways. Maybe you don't. But then what's the trade-offs long term, right? So you'll be thinking about it at some point. But I think you got to realize your data is going to change, your reality is going to change, right? So I'd say stay flexible, but you should be thinking about it. Well, you're thinking about it regardless. When you create an app, the first time you enter data into an application, you're essentially modeling it, right? So that's your time to get it right. So I'd say, yeah, think about it. Know the trade-offs of different approaches, know the database you're using, for example, know what's going to, and maybe anticipate expectations, right? Sometime you have a data warehouse or you want to do analytics, like what would that look like? So, but yeah, I wouldn't say it's the first thing you should think of, but I think it's also the first thing you should think of.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I guess you really start to feel it once you sort of start growing and that hockey stick growth curve.
Yeah, I mean, who's ever written an application from scratch and it's actually gone to production and then it became a startup, right? Not too many people. Okay, anyway. Well, if you ever find yourself in that situation, now you know.
Well, that's a good segue onto Emily, because you've grown out a data platform in, I think, 3 different startups or 3 different companies. What's your thoughts on some of the requirements and some of the challenges that you've found in growing a data capability within an early stage company?
Yeah, well, come to my talk at 5 to get some insights. But yeah, I very much agree. Data modeling, data contracting, it can be a lot of overhead. So you really need to think about, yes, you should take facets of it, but you don't need to go full steam on, spending all your time on data modeling, because usually as an early stage startup, you need to get to market as soon as possible, but you also don't want to harm yourself later on when you found that product market fit, you're scaling really quickly, and the data platform hasn't caught up. At Multitudes, we're kind of in that stage now. We started as a startup, had a very kind of bare bones data platform, and now part of being at this conference is very useful because we now have to look into, okay, now we really need to modernize, even though it's not that old, our data platforms. So I think that the main thing is just build what you need right now. Don't think too far ahead because things change. There's been things with like, oh, we really need to do real-time data processing. It's been 3 years and we still don't really need real-time data processing. So if we'd spent that time at the beginning building up all these expensive pipelines, like it wouldn't have provided much customer value. Also know what your customers need and just start really small.
I think it's an old Donald Knuth quote, like premature optimization is the root of all evil.
Yeah.
right? But I think premature anticipation is maybe a good thing.
Yes.
So
yes.
doesn't mean you have to do it, but you should think about it.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, that was what I was going to comment as well, because I think you're 100% correct. But one of the problems that I've seen happen over and over is that teams get into the mindset of just kind of looking 3 inches, or, well, we don't use inches over here, do we? But, looking like at 1 meter in front of their face as they're walking and constantly solving the next problem. And meanwhile, there's some huge governance challenge or infrastructure challenge that's looming far in the distance, and everyone knows that it's coming. Like, maybe it's a PII issue, maybe it's a compliance issue, maybe it's just a scaling issue, but we can never quite get around to solving it because the required work to actually solve that problem is massive, and it may require 6 months, 8 months, or a year of investment. So I think what Joe said is actually the right idea. Like, you need to prioritize for what's happening today, but you need to have some plan in your mind of when these big, larger compliance, governance, infrastructure rocks are going to hit you.
I think it also depends on like the nature of your startup, and especially today in the whole like remote working world. Our team started with folks, across 8 different time zones or something like that, or brand new startup. And for our transactional models, we did actually model them out as a communication mechanism internally, even just to get across the time zones, right? So that, because you didn't always have someone to ask. And I found that very valuable. But as we built our analytical models, a little less diligent on that in our internal data warehouse, mostly because I built the first version of it, and then I handed over to some real folks.
Yeah. So on that point, Ryan, what's some of the things that come to mind when you look at early stage startups and just the need to just get things done?
That is kind of my core philosophy in my career is literally, well, I'll say get shit done. You might not be able to as the organizer, but it's really just get shit done. What I care about is people's attitude, people's excitement, much more so than what they've done in the past, because I think that you can get a lot of experience and good experience by just having the right attitude. So what to look for on startups, like I think the analytics front is really important. I think understanding, obviously depends on what type of startup you're doing, but really understanding your users, really running experiments, and get shit done by experimenting, see the results, experiment, see the results.
Awesome, great advice. Thought I might take this opportunity to throw it out to the audience. We've got some amazing talent, all from overseas. So it's a great opportunity to ask these folks something about perhaps data engineering for a startup. Anyone willing to be courageous and ask a question? Go on up the front. We'll get you a mic.
Or if you just want Lars to walk to you in his gold jacket, then ask a question.
Well, that requires an extra fee.
Just because you want me to, Ryan.
That is fabulous.
The microphone turn on?
That's all right. I'll just yell.
Oh, no, I think it's on.
I'll try again. Hello. Oh, no. That's, wow, okay. That's good. Thank you. I was happy to just yell out, but I also, you need to exercise, so, we're working together here. So my question was about, there's been some general comments so far about in the startup, obviously the main thing is to not die rather than necessarily have perfect governance. And you need to know when is the point where you need to bring in the governance. And so, there's things like, okay, we're aware of a specific thing like, we are logging personal information and we hope nobody notices that before we get acquired. But is there are there metrics you can look for, or is there some kind of more disciplined way that you can look for that? Or is it just a matter of, judgment and looking for specific issues that are, coming down the runway at you?
Well, what does governance mean to you?
I'll just go back to yelling because that's fine. So I was a public servant, so I worked for the government for over a decade. So for me, governance is, a lot of documentation. And governance can be really, really powerful, actually help you go faster sometimes because you have agreement about what you're doing. But it front loads all those conversations. Governance is about front loading, this is the way we're going to do it. We're not going to do these other things. We have thought about both the things we are doing and the things we're not doing, and this is where the line is. Whereas, if you just want to get it done and talk about it later, that's not governance. That's, we'll just do it and then later on work out where the chips have fallen. That's what governance means for me.
I mean, I think like for us, we're building a software company, right? And so there's some level of compliance that our potential customers expect. So like we're doing the SOC 2 auditing and all right now at our company. And sure, it's painful at times. It's like, wait, why do we have a 40-page document that says nothing? Some of those compliance reports, but like, we recognize the value is actually for our users and making sure that we have documented our policies and are following those policies. And I think the where we do the balance is, we do push back against what is the norm that like Vanta is this, policy management platform that people use for these audits. And so, the person that's running it is like giving us the templates from Vanta. And it's like, no, that doesn't apply. Like we're gonna figure out how do we trim down like half of these pages and make it, something that we do today. But that's where, just tug and pull between what is norm and what will allow you to move fast.
Yeah, to add to that, I think there's an art in knowing how much is enough in the startup world, because you want to do enough to be able to help you in future, because obviously trying to implement governance, we're also going for SOC 2 compliance. Once you're quite far down the field, it becomes very hard with lots of people. Yeah, maybe you're logging customer data in your logs. So doing just enough. I know at Multitudes, we've always had that mindset of following best practice. So we looked into like, what is SOC 2? What will we be needing to do in 2 years' time when we do want to go for compliance to get these bigger customers? And then trying to follow just that best practice in our approach, some basic wiki pages about how we control the data, where it comes from, etc. But not going full into data governance until we need to, but not cutting ourselves off too early and making it hard in the future. So you kind of just have to figure out where the line is.
Yeah, I think both of those answers were great. I might take a slightly different swing at it, which is I think there's the governance that data engineers and data architects all understand that the business needs, and then there's the governance that the business is actually willing to implement, and those might be radically different and quite far apart from each other. And I think the core of the question you're asking is, how do you actually close that gap over time, and when do you start closing the gap in the first place? I think there's two things that could maybe help make that decision a little bit better. The first is probably somewhat obvious, but it's business value. The more that you can connect a governance effort to business value, the easier it's going to be to implement. And sometimes that means framing it outside of business value. So as an example, at Convoy, we had a lot of our product teams that were building machine learning models. And a significant number of these models were facing data quality issues on a regular basis. There were outages. We had lots of very wide tables that didn't have clear ownership. And so sometimes when failures happen, the teams that were building off of those models for their training data would sort of go back to the one big table and try to figure out, oh, wait, who created this particular column, because we need to ask them a bunch of questions, and they couldn't do it. Now, at the root of the problem was a governance issue. But the team didn't really see it that way. They saw it as an ownership issue and potentially as a quality issue. But at that point, what I could do is go in and say, okay, product teams and machine learning teams, I want you to quantify the impact of these errors for me. Tell me how much an outage means for you in terms of dollars and cents. How much does it mean for you in terms of lost developer productivity, both on the data science side and the software engineering side? I can then turn that into a number, and then I can go to the upstream team and say, hey guys, the downstream team is having X, Y, and Z issues. Here's the actual dollar amount that it's costing them, and the solution is better data modeling or clearer ownership or data contracts or whatever it might be. So that's one way to think about it, is always tying it to the dollar sign. The second thing I would say is that it's way, way harder to implement data governance iteratively if there's no foundation in place. If you have to start from zero every single time there's a new issue, it's just going to be really hard. One of my favorite governance tools is GitHub. Even though no one thinks about GitHub as a governance tool, that's what it is. It provides this foundation of change management to a code base so that as the company grows, you can layer in policies over time. You can layer in security policies. You can layer in policies like, hey, I want to have 2 people that always come in and comment on every single pull request, right? It is fundamentally a code governance tool. And because it's iterative, then you can scale that over time. I think the data world doesn't really have that type of foundational governance system that can scale iteratively, and it's something I think data teams should make more of an investment in the beginning.
Another question from the audience.
Oh, the guy sitting next to the guy who just asked the question?
Yeah, no, it's cheating. Today we've been hearing a lot about challenges, and presumably, challenges are going to change over time and they're not going to go away. I'm curious to know what motivates you, like despite these challenges. Why do you want to be in this field? What makes you want to get up in the morning and face these challenges and not just roll over and say, oh, it's too much for me, I can't handle it?
I think the biggest lesson I've learned from startups in particular is you're always going to have problems, but as long as the problems are changing, that's okay. If you're always fixing the same problem, then maybe something's not gone right here. I'm just kind of one of those type A personalities that really loves a challenge. It can get a bit exhausting as long as there's not too many challenges. I think as well it's about knowing there's always going to be fires, and there's some fires that are bigger than others and some fires that are going to burn faster than others. As long as you have a fire extinguisher and you know which ones you need to put out when, you can kind of, mentally manage that. Being a startup is it's very exciting. You kind of get a lot of joy out of solving those challenges.
I mean, that's also the core of being an engineer, really, is loving challenges and loving solving problems and like banging your head at the keyboard all night long in uni until you figure out that you missed a damn semicolon. Like, this is, what we've got in for by being in the engineering field. And I don't know, that's much more of a high for me than most other things. So.
I wouldn't say it's for everybody, though. I think you're going to ask yourself whether or not this is the types of challenges you want to be facing every day, right? For some people, it's not. I know a lot of... So tech and data are great. They're also a meat grinder, right? This industry is notorious for spewing people out. And then you go find something else to do in an equally meat grindy industry. I think industry in general is just very meat grindy, but tech in general, I think it's... Because there's a rate of change and there's a rate of progression, and these aren't the same things. There's a rate of progression of your career, and there's a rate of change that always occurs cyclically within the field, right? And so it was sort of the Red Queen effect. It was sort of Alice in Wonderland, right? So the Red Queen effect is basically you're running faster and faster to stay in the same place, right? This is sort of the crux of what we have to do as a profession is, we face challenges every day. And you also have the challenge of like learning new stuff. And you have to learn this over here. So it's a learning plus a doing challenge. And so I think it's somewhat unique to this field. The field of medicine, for example, you have to keep up on new techniques and whatever, but firefighting is a good one, actually. Firefighting is a good field. It doesn't change as much as tech, for example, right? Fires have been around for a while, so. Every field's challenging. I used to do construction and stuff, and I think that's hard work. The thing I like about it, at the end of the day, I can leave my work at home, right? Go get some beers with my friends and do that again the next day. So I think it just depends what you want to do. And this isn't for everybody, though, I can tell you that. I've been in this field, but this is all I've ever known, right? 23 or 4 years now.
You had your DJing career before.
I was DJing too, so that also helped a lot. But apparently still do once in a while. But Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it just depends. Like, what I think the good litmus test is, when you get to be my age or a bit older, like, what do you want to look back in your career as? What do you want to think of having done? Right? Like, I think I appreciate some of the challenges I'd solved back in the day, but could I have solved cooler challenges like going to Mars or something? Sure, I don't know, but you deal with you deal with what's in front of you. But burnout's a real thing too, right? I would say that's something that every one of us has probably questions about at one time or another in the data field. And I think it's something that I hope we're more open as an industry to talking about. Like, tech and data are, again, notorious for being meat grinders, and I hope that we're just a lot more open with our experiences. So,
yeah, well, unlike Joe, I didn't begin my career in data, so it's not all I've ever known. I used to be a journalist, actually, and I can tell you that one of the reasons I'm still in data is because the pay, even though it is a meat grinder, is so much better. Okay? That's probably 95% of the reason.
Actually, fun fact, what kind of journalist were you?
I was a sports journalist.
Yep.
Yeah. So I actually, the first real job I ever had, I left the US, I flew to Thailand, and I was going to the Muay Thai stadiums in Thailand where they did boxing. And I would go down, I was one of the only English speakers there, and I would record the fights and interview them. So yeah, I mean, I've come a long way from getting ripped off and not getting paid to now getting a consistent salary, so that's nice.
Would you agree with that assessment? Are you finding a career in data engineering worth the hassle, worth the grind? No?
No. No.
I mean, this is not uncommon, though. I mean, it's interesting. I can't tell you how many people I talk to each week. For some reason, people come to and want career advice from me. I don't know why. But they're like, hey, what should I do? I don't like my job, and I don't like where I am. And I was like, I don't know. I think at a certain point, if you're on this Groundhog Day cycle, find something else to do. Just, I don't know. I mean, if you can, quit. But a lot of people aren't that fortunate, though. You got, but you do need to, I think, put yourself in a financial situation, save up money, invest it. It's like, do what you got to do so you can save for the rainy day when inevitably you probably are burned out, and you're just like, screw it, I want to do something else. I want to go be a barista for a day or something.
Yeah, I guess I don't feel like this is particular to data. I don't feel like it's particular to engineering. The biggest challenges I've had in my career have all been people, and it's I want to go back into college and get a PhD in psychology because I feel like that would actually be much more valuable in business than. Don't do that. All right. Thanks for the advice. But I feel like that would be much more valuable to understand what's going on here. And I mean, I like the technology to me is usually that's the solvable part. It's the people, motivating people, how to communicate well, especially cross borders and cross time zones. That's the stuff that drives me batty. And in the organizations, larger organizations, the constant reorgs drive me batty. It's not the code. It's not the data.
Yeah. I think a lot of people find the code the escape, actually. It's like I can escape and solve these problems versus dealing with these nimwits over here, right? So as the old saying goes, you don't leave your job, you leave your manager.
Well, and I think another part of the problem with data engineering specifically is that it is uniquely more susceptible to people issues than I think other disciplines. And if you sort of look at an org chart and you mapped out where the people pain was by job function, I think you'd have software engineers that generally would feel pretty good about things, right? Especially in your modern microservice-oriented environments, hey guys, you can go off and be isolated and build your applications as quickly as you want, and you're free to use whatever technologies that you want, and you just got to work with your product manager, and maybe that guy could be a little bit annoying, but generally speaking, it's more of a creative endeavor. And then you've got sort of the product people and the business people on the opposite end, and they're pretty empowered to do their thing. And then you've got data engineers that are more or less sandwiched in the middle, and their primary job is getting data from one place to another, and then also when something breaks, taking all the blame for it, even though they didn't cause it. This was a big issue for us at Convoy. It was causing a tremendous amount of churn because I would say upwards of like 30 to 40% of our time was spent dealing with these service tickets where things would just blow up. Our team would get yelled at and blamed for it because the data consumers didn't understand that there's a whole upstream system, and that if anything changed up there, it would ultimately cause like either the data to show some incorrect number and the dashboard would be wrong, or the pipeline itself would just break and the model would blow up. Like they didn't actually understand that just because we had data engineering in our name, we weren't responsible for 100% of the data issues.
Is this where data
Chad brings
contracts
it
came
back
from?
to data quality.
Yeah. Always reeling it back in. But no, it's a really good point, because I think especially for startups, oftentimes you're the sole person looking after the data. You feel a lot of responsibility, and that sort of puts you in that position of rigidity where you're not really open to change as much because of that whole position that you're caught in the middle of like the producers and the consumers. Keen to see if we've got another question around the sort of data engineering startup space up the front here.
Seems to be only the front right is the folks asking the questions.
I think they
Go for
covered
it.
it before
Feel free.
too.
Yeah.
Cool. Hey. I think we're touching on a very significant topic here, which is just that most of it is a people problem. I think, Chad, you had a really great chart in one of your all talks on data contracts, which is like the cultural change and the maturity of the company, and at what point do you implement these, right? Because at the end of the day, it comes down to changing people's behavior, right? And if it gets too big, it's hard to change culture. So I guess to that point, right, at what size in the company do you make these changes, or do you have any tips of dealing with these cultural changes with people?
We'll make it a quick answer from each of the panelists on this one.
I think as early as you can start would be best. What my recommendation, I'm a big believer in Conway's Law. And if you're not familiar with Conway's Law, it basically says that the communication structure of an organization more or less determines its shape. And I think what the software engineering team has that right now data doesn't is a really great communication mechanism, specifically around change management. So when some code changes, you have a repo that you've subscribed to, you can see those changes, you review them, you understand how the code has evolved over time, and people can get involved in that. I think the issue with data is that the producers of data have no visibility into the way the data is being used. They don't know where it's going, they don't know who's using it, they don't know whether it's important or not, and so they don't care about it, right? That's just naturally how things evolve. So I think if as early as possible, people can start helping the data producers become aware of where their data is flowing, I think Conway's Law will essentially will cause the culture to change.
We're nearly at time with the panel, but I just wanted to get your advice from each of you around, what's your top tips if you are a data engineer, maybe that single data hire in an early stage startup. What's your top tips for how to survive those sort of crunch points? We'll start with you, Joe.
Do your best.
Just work harder, longer, more hours.
More hours.
On the hamster wheel.
Yeah.
Keep it spinning.
Care about the data and the customer. Be mine.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that's connect those producers and those consumers, and make sure that there's a direct connection there, and you're not sitting as the middleman in all those conversations.
Seems like a better communication mechanism is really what's at play here, isn't it, Chad?
Yeah.
To Ryan's point.
Yep. I mean, I agree with Ryan. That's my answer too. So.
Yeah, awesome. Well, round of applause to each of our panelists. Hopefully I've done a reasonable job. I've finished a couple of minutes early, so
no
love to
tackling
stay
needed.
on side.
I don't
Yeah,
have to tackle anyone.
awesome. Well, thanks so much. We'll
Get
over to
out.
you. Out.
Come on.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.